my name is Alina Crone-Hedman. I work with the Minnehaha Conservation District. And yeah, so this is going to be going through a little bit of how we go about developing opportunities for producers, talking with them and different things like that, and then go into some of the funding opportunities that we do and how we work with that. And I'll review at the end some of our projects and programs that we have available and that we've done. And if there's anything you have question-wise, if you want to maybe try to model a program similar or anything, obviously we can try to help you with that. So the first thing is always, where do you get started? So with us, as we're the Conservation District, we're a little bit different. Sometimes we're looking at programs that we want to implement to try to bring into our county. Sometimes we have producers come to us and they're like, we are in need of A, B, and C. And so the big thing when you're developing your idea of what you're going to do for your program that you have to think about, and let me know if I need to be any louder. Am I good? Okay, cool. All right. My husband always says I'm very loud, so I'm not really concerned, but in case I had to. Obviously we always start with looking at our needs, so looking at your needs. If you need something, there's a lot of times someone else is going to need a similar program, or they might be experiencing a similar difficulty. I know one of our programs that we developed was something with raised beds, because I live in an apartment and I desperately want to grow things and feed people, but I have a patio. So that kind of was the spark of one of the programs that we did. You want to look at those around you. So again, you're talking with others, seeing if they are interested in something similar, but you also want to look at where you are, like geographically, culturally even, seeing if there's any needs there, so that you can best come up with a program that's going to be successful. Look at trends. We're constantly looking to see, are there programs that are happening elsewhere that we're not having here? Why aren't we having them here? Is there something that maybe we can start as a program, because then that might be more viable for us to try to get funding if it's one of the first ones, it's a pilot. And then always look to the future. So some of the programs I'm going to discuss with you later, they've been 3-4 years in the making, is now that we're finally getting to do them. And so just because you can't do something today, you might have a step that you can do today, so then you can finally get to that end product that you've been trying to do. So know your goals. A lot of you are very aware of the SMART goals concept: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. We always try to keep this in the back of our heads with everything we're doing, because once you have your idea, the next thing that we typically do is we try to set our goals right away, because in any funding opportunity, whether you're just fundraising or if you're going after grants, you need to know your goals and you need to know your objectives, because that's the way you get people to believe in your project and give you money. So for specific, I always see it as do not take on too much, because we always want to do everything and we want to help all the people, but you're not necessarily going to be able to do that. You have to sit there and figure out what is actually something that we can specifically do that we think will have a good impact. Measurable, you always have to think about your numbers. You need to show your outcomes, so you have to be thinking about that quantitative data so you can have something that comes through along with all of the qualitative stuff that you'll have. You got to be honest with yourself, and that's like the biggest thing I feel like whenever you're going after one of these programs, is you need to be like, what do we actually need and what can we actually do? Because a lot of times people will want to do a project, but you might not have the capacity for it. And then think about your mission always. Just because something sounds like a great opportunity, it might not fit with your mission, and so don't necessarily go and pursue that. And then again, timely or time-based. You need to think about your scale. What do you genuinely believe is going to be able to be done and how long it's going to take? And if you need to, breaking down into phases is great, and I'll get into that a little bit more when I'm talking about funding, but the more phases you have, you can't always apply for more grants to be like, this was for phase 1 and phase 2, and then you have something to show, like, we accomplished this, so that gives you a better opportunity at trying to get some of your funding. Information gathering, when you're looking for information, obviously everyone always goes to surveys. I just recommend, if you are doing surveys, try to consider multiple sources. When we've done programs, we'll do multiple surveys on Facebook. We'll have them in various newsletters. We'll do them through other organizations that we're partners with. And then think about it when you're developing them. What would you actually fill out? I have had people develop surveys, and it's like, would you do this? Because I can't get you to email me back. And that takes 1 minute, and the survey's 20 minutes long. You're not going to fill this out. So you want to think about, yes, you want to get the relevant data, but think about what is the average person going to actually sit down and do? If it's over 5 minutes, I'm going to assume most people will not fill it out. Studies and articles, these are huge, especially when you're going in and you're looking for some of the funding for these opportunities. We have had such good success when we've been trying to apply for grants and things like that by having gone and done this information gathering step after we've gotten our idea, our goals in mind. Because when you're starting to search for funds, sometimes you'll find out that there's something there and it's only like 3 weeks and you have to apply. But if you've done all of the research and everything in the background first, you actually can possibly apply for it. So you're going to want to consider different perspectives and subjects. So obviously, census data is always good when you're doing agriculture programs or conservation programs, but also think about like mental health, because there's always stuff that can be done with that, and you might be able to find really good data on that to support your program. And then think about what others have compiled for you. So for instance, I'm telling you about all of these sources that we have. We have no problem sharing them. So think about what others might be able to give you, or we can tell you about one of our programs if you wanted to model it, and then you can use all of our research as a means to justify yours. And then again, other organizations, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If something's existing and it's working and it shows that there's capacity for it and it shows that there's an interest in it, why not just continue, and you can modify the program to your needs, but you have all of the stuff that you need to prove that it's a viable program. It's in the details. So I always want to talk about this, and I talk to a lot of people about this. So I write a lot of grants with our conservation district, and accuracy is very critical with budget. So if you know my boss, he's a great person, but when you talk to him about like funding, he'll be like, yeah, I think it's going to be like $500, but it's like $397. And it's like when you go into a grant world, you need to know it's $397, not necessarily $500. So make sure you're trying to be as accurate with that as you can. You want to think everything matters, and I put like, don't forget the sunscreen, because you want to think about like, okay, we are going to need office supplies, we're going to need this, and you can write those into grants. But a lot of people, they'll put in for this funding for a position because they're like, okay, we need somebody to run this program, and that's what they get. And then it's like, but we have absolutely nothing, we don't have a computer for them, we don't have any means for them to be doing it, we just got their salary. So you really need to think about that, your materials, and then any necessary jobs that you might need in addition to what you are already thinking about regarding that. So like when we have a garden project that I'm going to talk a little bit more about, we had to write a second grant so that we could get technical assistance to implement that. And then developing figures, I'm just always pushing this too when you're trying to do a project, because in theory, you think it's going to work, and then you see it on paper and you're like, yeah, that doesn't work. You might have larger space or smaller space for what you're trying to do. You need to try to work with what you have. So like we have a program, we have 5 acres. 5 acres is bigger than I thought it looked like. And so we were able to do more, which is great, but I needed to know that before we started on it. So here's the big thing with finding funding. The things I want to emphasize when you're looking for funding. So if you're a producer and you're looking to try to do a program and you're coming to us, this is going to be what we're doing. If you're trying to help producers, here's the big things. You want to know what you can access. So nonprofit status. So what we fall into is we're a non-for-profit government entity, which is different than a nonprofit. So we have to really think about that when we're going and looking for funding, because sometimes we are not able to utilize grants that way. Something that we've fallen into within Sioux Falls city limits is zoning rules. We'll have programs that we're trying to implement, and yes, you technically can implement them, but there's certain zoning rules that make it where it's not going to work for the producers, so we have to look into different ways to do it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to that program, because we have ran into some issues with something. And then your timeline. Once you are looking for funds, make sure you know when you're going to be starting it, when you're going to be trying to end it, if you're able to apply for stuff, because we've had it where we're looking at a grant and then we decide last minute not to do it because we realize we're not going to be able to start it in October. We have to wait till January, and then we're already into a quarter of the grant cycle. And yes, you can always get an extension, but it's easier if you can kind of plot that out. Partnerships. We do a lot of work with partnerships. We work with the city of Sioux Falls. We have worked with the Soil Health Coalition. We work with various entities, because sometimes hurdles can be reduced with your partnerships, working with NRCS is always a great partnership depending on what you're trying to do. They may have funds not available elsewhere. So with the Conservation District, there's certain opportunities that we can possibly work. So we've had producers after the derecho came to us, they needed some shelter belt assistance. We were able to apply and get funds just through our conservation districts throughout South Dakota. And we were able to do like a 40-60 cost split with them. We have NACD grants through the National Association of Conservation Districts. These are all things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to apply for, but if you had a program and you went to your conservation district, they may be able to help you. But I always want to caution too, more people do mean more opinions. And so you want to be aware of your values and be selective in the thought process of that, just so that you're not bringing in a partner because you really want a partnership and it has nothing to do and it's not relevant with what your overall outcome is. So funding types, the ones that we typically work with, and this obviously isn't all of them, but we do grants, we work with foundations, organizations, and then fundraisers is how we kind of get the money that we need for our program. So if you're looking to establish something, this is a good starting point. Grants, you always want to know what is needed to apply. If you're going through like grants.gov or something like that, you're going to need to be applying for your SAMS number, different things like that, to make sure that you can get in those applications. My big thing is always big grants are nice, but so are small ones. We've had a lot more success going after some of the smaller grants because you can have 2 or 3 grants that fund a project. We do have a lot of projects that are funded by multiple grants. And so you could put all of this effort in and apply for a $200,000 grant, not get it. You could put in effort and apply for 4 $50,000 grants, maybe get 2 of those, and now you at least have $100,000 instead of having nothing. So that's always a big thing to consider. And also always be aware of stipulations and boundaries. So sometimes the smaller grants, you do get into luck where there isn't quite as stringent of stipulations of what you're supposed to be spending it on. So we've had instances where some of them we can't use to buy any kind of like supplies, outreach materials, things like that, because it doesn't technically fall within those grant means. So then we have to look for other ways to kind of offset that. So be aware of those. And then don't be afraid to think outside of the box. So, depending on what you're doing, you might be like, oh, okay, I'm doing conservation work. We're going after conservation grants. I'm doing agriculture. We're going after agriculture grants. We have had people have so much success going after like mental health grants, art grants. If it has a tie with it and it's kind of what you're doing, or education grants, a lot of people don't necessarily think about those right away, but those can assist, because even if you're a producer and you're doing some kind of like agritourism on your farm, that is an education opportunity, and so you might be able to go after an education grant and have more funds available to you than you would have thought initially. Foundations. So big thing with them is if you're going after a foundation, a group of people, you're going to want to know what was funded before, because you want to know if they've already funded a lot of projects and they're not necessarily wanting to go in the direction of what you're requesting, or if they tend to really like to fund the type of project you have, then they might be a more viable foundation for you to try to go after and see if you can discuss with them and get some funding through them. Organizations, I always say start local, then expand. Like even us with the Conservation District, if we had a producer come in that was looking to try to start something, there's a chance you could even talk to us at one of our board meetings and we might be able to give you a few $100s to start out something. And I know that might not sound like a lot, but if you were able to get $500 and you can kind of keep going, it can help, because then you have some buy-in from someone, or we can help you write grants, we can give you letters of support, we can do some in-kind matching, things like that, so that you at least have a base to start as you're applying. But then, and then you can always expand with that. Fundraisers, the only thing I'm going to talk about with that is it's great if you know what works and you see other people doing things and you think that's going to be a great fundraiser, but also try to be original, and you can always use them if you're trying to create a business or if you're trying to create an organization. Brand awareness is always something that you can be aware of. If you're doing a t-shirt fundraiser or selling certain things, now people are going to have your brand and they're going to be like, oh, okay, I've seen this around. So your fundraiser can double as marketing. So some common sources for funding, grants, think you guys have heard a lot about all of the NRCS opportunities and all of the thousands of acronyms, and all of them for some reason have a large amount of C's in them. So it's always fun when I'm talking about it. So, the big ones are always like, your conservation, collaboration, cooperative agreements, your conservation innovation grants, conservation collaboration grant, that's what funds my position. And like CIGs right now, they're open for application and stuff. Then there's, the USDA has a variety of grants. Ones that I know people have gone after before are like urban agriculture and innovation production grants. They have planning and implementation ones. We can, and again, when I'm talking about partnerships, that's a really big thing for someone to try to take on as a producer. So that's why I always say you can always maybe see if you have a conservation district or if you have NRCS or if you have an entity you can partner with if you're going after these kind of funds. Game Fish and Parks grants I always talk about because they have great trail grants. So if you're trying to put in a path or you're trying to do some kind of education that way, that might be a great opportunity for you. With foundations, I would just check with community funding entities first. So like in Sioux Falls, one of the examples I have up here is like, so the Sioux Falls Arts Council, there's several foundations that fund things in Sioux Falls. And so the Sioux Falls Arts Council is one of them because they like to give them to community groups so then they can go and give the money down and trickle it down to the smaller projects. So before you're trying to go and meet with a foundation, you should know if they fund things in your area first, so that you're not sitting there waiting for your meeting just to find out like, oh, you're an art program? Okay, well, we give to the Sioux Falls Arts Council, so you actually have to go through and try to get one of their grants. And then utilize directories. There's so many out there. You'd be surprised at how many foundations. I'm always shocked. Organizations, you might want to even think about wildlife organizations, and I know that sounds a little bit different, but like with conservation stuff, anything that has to do with establishing habitat, you can sometimes get money from wildlife organizations. So like National Wild Turkey Federation has the Super Fund, and we've received assistance from them and Pheasants Forever as well. Local entities, talked with the Conservation District, and then when in doubt, Google. I have gotten us money just by randomly Googling, how do I get conservation money in South Dakota? Just, that's it. And then you just go through, and I mean, probably most people don't have my patience with the internet of looking for like 30 minutes through all of the things that pop up, but you'd be surprised at some of the things that you can find. So now I'm just going to go through some of our projects. So one of our things that we have currently going is the Minnehaha Sustainable Agriculture Initiative. So if you've read, there actually was an article that just came out again talking about our next funding cycle. We have this funded through NRCS, through a CIS, which is a Conservation Implementation Strategy. We received multiple year funding for this. And we did this to address multiple resource concerns in Minnehaha County. We had a lot of producers that were really interested in trying to do high tunnels, and they had applied through EQIP, but we were having a little bit of difficulty at the time trying to get them funded. And so what the Conservation Implementation Strategy is there's a certain amount of EQIP funding that is kind of set aside for our county for that program. So then that way we know that there's going to be some money that's more likely for them to be able to receive these things. We also had cover crops and then critical area seeding, those kind of resource concerns were needing to be addressed. The way that the Conservation Implementation Strategy program works is that you need to try to be a little bit more specific. So a whole county, you really shouldn't try to just be like, we're gonna do stuff in the whole county. They're trying to create change by making it a smaller scale. So they would like, specific kind of like branching it down. We decided, because we had a lot of people near like Garrettson area and up in Baltic that were interested in trying to get some high tunnels, that we would focus on the northeast kind of part of Minnehaha County. We also had some areas of interest with like Split Rock Creek and stuff that we had noticed were getting some significant runoff. So that's kind of why we put that down. But we've been doing that now for, I want to say this is the 4th year that we got, so we have funding through 4 years that we've been doing this, and we've been able to help get a significant amount of cover crops and high tunnels within the county. And this all started because we had producers come and talk to us being like, we really want to get high tunnels, we're having trouble with general EQIP, is there anything more that can be done? And we're like, yeah, there is, and we took it on. So that is one of the successes. And then I just have one of the high tunnels as an example of what we have people typically kind of go through. So one thing I will say though is, and we had some issues with this, anything that falls within Sioux Falls, we have zoning issues because this is considered a shed in Sioux Falls. It does not look like a shed, does it? No, it's plastic, it's metal, but unfortunately due to zoning restrictions, this is a shed. So we have had people that have applied and been able to get the EQIP funding that have now struggled with that. So one of the ways that we can try to navigate that is we can now do like low tunnel funding, because that doesn't fall into the shed stipulation. It's the height that makes it start becoming a shed, and then the square footage of what a high tunnel typically is, it's seen as a shed structure because they're just not used to that kind of urban concept of a high tunnel. So that's something to, like I said, when you're looking at funding to consider, but that's one way that we're kind of working around it for producers to still try to help them get assistance while following all of the guidelines, because we do want to make the city of Sioux Falls happy because they are one of our partners that we work with. Our Prairie and Pollinator program, this has been my favorite project that I've worked on so far, I'm going to be honest. I worked 3 years to try to get this to go in Sioux Falls, so I'm really jacked that this got to happen, actually. I'm going to be honest. So we have multiple funding entities that we've helped with this. So we have, through my grant, we were able to do some of the educational aspects of it with NRCS funding. Then we received an NACD grant, and so we had an urban and community conservation grant. We have an implementation grant that's helping with this, and then the last project I'm going to talk to you about. And then we also get some City of Sioux Falls assistance, so they helped us with like the graphic design work and some of the seed. So this has been a joint program with the City of Sioux Falls. What it was we received a lot of people saying, I'd love to do pollinator stuff, but I don't want to buy an acre of seed because I have a tiny little front yard. Why, I don't want to be spending all of this money. I don't want to be wasting this seed. And then we had people saying, it's really just, it's going to cost a lot of money. I feel like there's no affordable options, or I'd love to do this, but I don't have the education that I feel like is necessary to try to implement this. So we went with that, the lack of knowledge, educating the public, affordability, and we created a kit that we sell for $15 and and whatever taxes, which is like 68 cents or something like that. And it comes with an educational booklet that we developed, so that it goes all the way from, here's how you get your ground prepped. Go ahead and solarize, but you better be doing it sooner rather than later, because the amount of people that are like, I put plastic down for 2 weeks and the grass is still alive. It's like, yes, that probably is going to always happen. Talk to them about how they can eradicate certain weeds, things like that, and it goes all the way through planting and then maintaining native cover, because that's the other thing that we always fall into, is a lot of people don't realize once you plant it, you can't just pretend it doesn't exist anymore. It does need water if it's not raining. It does need you to be weeding it a little bit, things like that, till it starts to get grown in. But we have the booklet, a sign that people can display so that neighbors that are coming through know that you're not just not mowing your grass, because that's always been a thing. And we have a seed mix that we worked with, because that was our big thing with the city. They have zoning limitations, and we think this is so funny in the conservation district. They're like, it should stay around 18 inches. It's like, what native grasses are just going to be like, yep, it's 18, we're done growing. We understand there's a zoning rule, you know what I mean? But we worked to get the shortest ones that we can, that we're given a little bit of leeway with that. And we made sure they're 100% South Dakota native, so that we're not falling into any conservation issues with that, and people can purchase those. So again, this is a program that we do. If anybody was interested in trying to do a program like this or similar, we have absolutely no qualms about sharing it. We will give you everything and anything you want to try to do this kind of a program. You can come visit with us. We can walk you through things. We already have, like, the city of Brandon is looking at adopting this program, since we have this mainly going in Sioux Falls. But we've had approximately 100 kits sold. I think it's closer to like 120 now, and then we're going to be going into our next phase, because we had the one thing we're going to be changing in our kits is we had a lot of people pulling the native plants up being like, it's a weed. I don't recognize this as a flower. And we're like, you just pulled all of the flowers out of your garden. So here's some additional seed for you to interseed and try to fix that up. But we will have pictures now of what it looks like when they're growing in, so you know that's not just a weed. And then here's some of the gardens that have come in, and we were really surprised at how well they came in within the first year. These were after 4 months of planting, so it came in really well in a lot of these people's yards, so we were pretty excited about that. And then here's our next adventure is our community garden and education space. So again, multiple funding entities. We have our Conservation Collaboration Grant. We have our NACD grant that's going into this because when we started trying to put this together, and again, this has been 4 years in the making, and now it's going to happen this spring, and it's so exciting. We needed more technical capacity, and that's why the NACD grant came in, because it's actually mainly for technical capacity, which is great. So we were able to get some funds so we can hire some people for the minimal groundwork we're going to have to do out there and things. But it's a partnership with the city of Sioux Falls. We are given 10 acres of land over an aquifer by the north end of Sioux Falls on 72nd and Ditch Road. We're going to start with 5, and then we can get the additional 5 whenever we need it. And we're running it as a dual education space and a community garden space because we had a need for both, and we're like, why don't we combine them? Because then you're always going to have people out there utilizing it, even if people aren't out there necessarily doing the community garden. We have the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition that's going to come in and help us with some of our educational sections on soil health. We have some education areas that we're trying to do to make people aware of some of the resource concerns with some of the various things. So we're going to have a turf demonstration because that's kind of what the city really wanted to show as alternate turfs to grass. So we're going to have buffalo grass, some of our pollinator mixtures, different things, so people can see how that's planted. But this was created to address multiple concerns to increase gardening opportunities. There'll be rentable plots, but we're going to have water out there. We're going to have a shed for tools and everything, so people can just come out there with nothing and be able to garden. We wanted to have another education space. We currently have the Gevick site, which is great on conservation work, but we wanted something that would go more into urban ag so that people, before they're having to spend money, producers, if they're like, I really don't know about this process, they can come to us and we can experiment with it out there. And so they can know, is this going to be worthwhile? And then we want to create community support of urban agriculture. We want people to be aware this is something, it's becoming more prevalent, and we want you to see what it looks like. So our first phase should be completed this spring, and that's going to be the first section of our community garden. And here's my really awesome map that I made because, I have really fancy tools. But it's going to involve, we're going to have an orchard and some shrubs because we want to show people different types of fruits that they can grow here. That kind of came out of us selling trees, and a lot of people will be like, it's a fruit tree, so I'm going to grow it, and I'm going to have amazing, pears. And it's like, they're going to be smaller than you're thinking they're going to be here. It's good wildlife forage, and you can maybe make some jam out of them, but you're not going to be taking a Bartlett pear off the tree like you would an apple necessarily, depending on what you're planting, and having a nice bite out of it. So we want to show people what they look like when they're grown in, so they're more aware of what they're buying. But also we want to show people that you can actually do, a food forest if you know what you're planting. We're going to have some, like I said, the turf grass demos, soil health demos. We're hoping to do some compost education. We are having a high tunnel out there because we're in Renner technically, because this road here, this is Sioux Falls, this is Renner. We don't have the zoning rules, and I was really excited when I figured that out. We're going to have a bunch of different kinds of raised beds because we want to show people that what they think a raised bed doesn't necessarily have to be that. So they can see different concepts of what they would want to build. We'll have various pollinator areas out there. We've talked about once we get this established, getting some beehives out there and some other stuff that we're going to be working on. And then this is just my own personal hope, is I want to put some bug hotels out there because I feel like a lot of people aren't aware of some of these concepts. But the coolest thing about this is we get to, play a little bit since it is an education area. So if it's a concept and we want to see how it works, we're going to put it out there and try it. In the high tunnel, we're planning on planting things maybe people don't conventionally plant, and we're going to see how it grows. In the raised beds, we're going to plant things. We've had people ask, can you grow strawberries out of a raised bed? The answer is yes, but it's not necessarily the simplest process, so we're going to try to figure out how to make it easier. But those are just a few of the programs, and that's kind of what I have for you today, going through discussing what's available, how you could go about creating your own opportunities, or how you could approach other people to try to do something. So are there any questions? And if I talked fast, I'm so sorry. I can go over things again, because that's the other thing my husband complains about all the time is I talk loud and fast. So any questions? All right, well, if you have any thoughts or if you want to talk to me about specific projects and get information, feel free to email me or call me. I can send you off anything. And if you want to get involved in any of the projects, let me know. But I have no issue going through anything. We can invite you out to the district and we can kind of go over stuff with you too. So.
Did you bring any seed packs along for the pollinators?
Oh, I might have one in my backpack. I have to see. I end up handing them out all of the time, so I'm not sure if I have any on me right now. So. Otherwise, I can give you a list of what's in it, and we have it through Millborn, and if you contact them and we're like, we talked with the Conservation District, we kind of would like to do stuff with that seed mix, they'll just give you a bag. It costs around $250 for the bag, so.
What's the square footage?
We do about 100 square feet little packets that we sell to people, and so what we did, just because we don't want people, if they want to do a larger garden space, to have to buy signs and the booklet over and over. We sell the kit for about 15, and then we sell the additional seed packet for 4, so you can buy extra seed packets. And if you want to do a larger bag of seed, then we'll figure out a different way, because we want to be as cost effective, because our goal is just to get conservation stuff on the ground. So any other questions? All right, well, thank you for listening to me.